Okay, in your first set of tutorials, you learned how to sketch in Onshape and you learned about some of the different ways to dimension and constrain your sketches. This tutorial is going to go into more depth with some of those and include some other constraints that you haven't seen yet. So first of all, I made a new Onshape document and notice what I've titled it. It's Sketching Practice and then my name. You should do the same, make your own document, put your own name in it, and immediately share it with me so that you can get credit for doing it. Then I'm going to start a new sketch, and I'm going to sketch on the top plane, and I'm going to click on the view cube over here so that I'm looking, if I click on the side that says top, I'll be looking straight on at the top plane, and I'll stay on that view the entire time I'm doing this sketch. So now in your sketch, you know how to do lines and rectangles and circles, and then you also know how to put some of these constraints in and dimensions over here. If I click this drop down for the constraints menu, you can see that there's actually a lot of different constraints, some of which you've used and some of which you haven't. But by the time we're done learning Onshape in this class, I need you to know how to use everything starting at coincident and going down until midpoint. The things at the bottom here are not really going to show up for you, but you do need to make sure you know how to use all of these. So what I'm going to do right now is just walk through. I'm going to draw a pretty random shape. It doesn't really have any meaning, but it'll give you a demonstration of all of these different constraints so you can get some practice using them. We're also going to practice using some keyboard shortcuts that just make it faster and easier to draw your sketches as you get more comfortable in Onshape. Using those shortcuts can just really help speed things up. So first of all, I'm going to start by drawing a line, and of course I can do that by clicking over here for line. But notice how when I hover over it, it also says L in parentheses. So L is the keyboard shortcut to start a line. So instead of actually clicking there, I'm actually just going to press L on my keyboard, and you can see that it's now selected. I'm going to start my line at the origin here, and then I'm going to draw it horizontal, right? And notice how before I even click to put the line down, there's that little pop-up just below my cursor with a horizontal line showing that it's actually putting a horizontal constraint on the line automatically, and I don't even have to do anything else. Of course, I can move the line so it's not horizontal and it won't have that constraint. So I'm just going to draw that one line and escape it. And of course, if I draw it not horizontal, but I decide later I do want it horizontal, I can click on the line, I can go to my constraints over here, I can press horizontal. I can also just press H on my keyboard, which is the shortcut for horizontal. Right? So I've got my line selected, I press H on the keyboard, now it's a horizontal line. I'm going to draw a couple more lines. So again, L on my keyboard to start drawing a line. I'm going to start at the origin, I'm going to draw something at an angle, I'm going to draw something and allow it to automatically be constrained horizontal, and then I'm going to connect to the original line. So now I have this sort of oddly shaped trapezoid drawn. And notice how my line tool is still selected, but I'm done drawing lines for right now. So I'm going to press escape to get rid of that. And then I'm actually never mind, I'm going to draw one more line. So I'll press L again. This line, I want it to be at the midpoint of this top line. So I'm going to hover until I get that square so I know that it's the midpoint. And then I'm going to go down to the bottom of the trapezoid. I want my line to connect the top to the bottom. And I also want my line to be vertical, so I'm just going to hover until I see that it is vertical and it has snapped to that constraint as well. Right? And then I'm going to escape to end that line. Now I'm going to add some dimensions so that this whole sketch will turn black, meaning it's fully constrained. Right now it's blue, that means it's under constrained or there aren't enough constraints and things can still move around as I drag them, right? So I'm going to add dimensions until it turns black, the whole thing. So first of all, the dimension tool is up here, but again, I can use the shortcut D to make that faster. So I'm going to press D on my keyboard and now I'm making a dimension. I'm going to dimension this top line to be 3 inches and this bottom line to be 7. And then it's still not fully constrained. I'm going to make the height be 2. And I'm going to dimension the angle between the side of the trapezoid and the bottom of it. So if I want the angle between 2 lines, I click on one line and then I click on the next line. And now that dimension has turned into an angle, and I'm going to make that angle 75 degrees. Okay, so with those dimensions, I now have a fully constrained sketch. Right, so I'm going to escape the dimension tool. So again, I'm still setting dimensions right now, but if I want to escape that, just press the escape key on my keyboard. If I want to move where I see any of these numbers, I can just click on them and drag them. That doesn't actually change anything about the sketch. It just can make it easier or harder to look at depending on where you put the numbers. Okay. Next, I'm going to draw another line. So L on my keyboard. I'm going to have that line start at this point at the top and come down at an angle until it hits the bottom of the trapezoid again. And then I'm going to escape. And now another constraint, I want this line that I just drew and the right side of the trapezoid to be two parallel lines. So that is another constraint that I can put in. So I'll go up here and I'll find the parallel constraint and I'll press that one. And notice how now this line turned black because there's only one way for it to have the two endpoints I gave it and still be parallel to this other line. Now I'm going to draw some circles. So I can click over here to draw a circle, or I can press C on my keyboard and that circle tool will be selected. I'm going to draw one circle right here, and I'm going to draw another circle right here. And of course, right now they're blue. They have a lot of freedom to move. I'm going to escape the circle tool. I'm done drawing circles for now. And I'm going to put some constraints on this circle. So one constraint I can use is I can make the circle tangent to the line, meaning that it'll touch the line at just one point, and that's it. Right, so I'm going to select the circle and I'm going to select the line. Then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to select the tangent constraint, which also has the shortcut T on the keyboard. So tangent, right? So now the circle is tangent to this line. I also want to make this circle tangent to this line. So I'm going to select the circle and the other line and also press T to make it tangent. I'm going to do the same thing with this circle and this line just to get more practice. So circle, line, tangent, circle, line, tangent. Right? But the circles, notice they're both still blue. If I click on their center and I try to drag them, I can still move them. But notice how as I move it, it's still always touching those two lines and staying tangent to them, right? So if I want to turn those circles black, I'm going to need to add some dimensions that'll sort of stop it from moving side to side, right? So I'm going to put a new dimension in, and I'm going to select the center of the circle, and then I'm going to select this point over here, and I'm going to dimension like the length between those. And notice how actually as I'm doing this length, there are three different ways I can do it. Where it is right now, it's doing sort of a diagonal line. How long is that line from the center of the circle to the other dot that I clicked? If I move my mouse down like this, now you can see it's actually giving me a horizontal dimension. So it's saying side to side horizontally, but not diagonally, what that distance is. And if I move my mouse over here, I can create a vertical dimension. So it's from the center of the circle vertically down to this other dot that I had pressed up. So I'm going to use that type of dimension for this one. And I'm going to set it to 0.3. And then I'm going to practice those dimensioning again, but I'm going to choose a different dimension this time for this other circle. So from the center of the circle to the origin, I'm going to set that dimension. And I'm going to leave it as this diagonal type of dimension here. And I'm going to set it to 0.9. So now both of those circles are fully constrained, and I can move those dimensions wherever I want just to make them easier to read on my sketch. I'm going to draw one more circle. So C is the shortcut for drawing a circle, and I'm going to just randomly place it over here, and then I'm going to escape my circle tool. And now that I've drawn that, I actually think I want this circle and this circle to be centered in the same spot. So there's a constraint called concentric that will do that for two circles. So if I select these two circles and go over to the constraints here, concentric puts the centers of the two circles in the same place. So this new circle that I drew that's blue, I can make it bigger or smaller, but the center of it is now constrained to stay in place. Another constraint that we often want to use is an equal constraint, and that forces two things to be the same length as each other, or the same size as each other. So if I click on this circle, and then I can go to my constraints and I can choose the equal constraint, right? So because this circle is already fully constrained to a certain size, this circle changes to match it. The nice thing about an equal constraint is when you change dimensions later, everything will automatically update. So if I change this circle, if I decide to move it to a different dimension, right? Notice how this circle moved and this circle changed size at once, but I'm going to change it back to what I had before. Right. So just a few more constraints that I want to demonstrate. I'm going to draw another line, and I'm going to connect that line to the midpoint of this line. So remember, search for the square. That's going to be the midpoint of the line. And then as I'm drawing my line, I can draw it sort of out at whatever random angle. So there's no particular constraint on it right now. But now I actually want this line and this line to be perpendicular. So with both of those lines selected, there is a perpendicular constraint. So that means the two lines form a right angle now. And then I'm going to draw a 3-point arc that goes from the end of this line, and right now I'm just going to sort of place it randomly somewhere. So that's my 3-point arc. And so you've seen me use the tangent constraint to make a circle tangent to a line. I can also use that to make the arc tangent to the line. So if I select the arc and the line, and then T is the shortcut for a tangent constraint, notice how now as this arc comes out of the line, it just comes out smoothly. It's like if this arc were a complete circle, that circle would be tangent to the line. But I can also just have, I can say that just the arc is tangent to the line. I'm going to draw one more line. I'm going to make it from here coming up, and I'm going to make it vertical. Notice how the vertical constraint is being automatically placed just because I drew it close to vertical, so it's kind of snapping into that constraint. Right? And then I'll escape the line. Now I want the end of this arc to be at the end of this line. So that is a coincident constraint. When you want two things to be in the same place, we say that they are coincident. So I'm going to click this dot and that dot. Those are the two things I want to be in the same place. The shortcut for coincident is I on your keyboard, or of course I could also have just pressed it right there from the menu bar. Okay. And then one more thing I want to do, this circle right here, I would like it to be exactly half of a circle or a semicircle. So when something is exactly a semicircle, what I'm going to do, the way I'm going to force that constraint to happen, I'm going to draw a line, but I want it to be a construction line. So line L, and then Q is the keyboard shortcut for that, right? So I can type L and then Q on my keyboard, and I'm going to draw it from between the two endpoints of the arc. Now, if this circle is a semicircle, the center point of the circle is actually going to be on that line. That's what it, like by definition, how a semicircle works. So I can click the dot and the line, and I want them to be coincident or in the same place. So I, on my keyboard, will make that coincident constraint happen. Now, one last thing that I need to put in, if I want to make my entire sketch fully constrained, turn all of the lines black, I just need to dimension this arc. If I set what radius that arc has, then it won't be able to move anymore. So D is the shortcut to make a dimension, or I can click it over here. And then when I click on this arc, it's going to automatically put in a radius dimension, right? So the R there that you can see, it means radius. When I click, I'm going to make the radius 2 inches. And notice now my entire sketch is fully defined. And when we look at this list of constraints, so I said all of these constraints right here, from midpoint up to the top of the list, are the ones that you need to know. And we've used all of them to make this sketch. So now you're all done with the first step of this tutorial.